Hello from him. It's episode 92 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Now, Sid, we've been extraordinarily blessed with news this week. We've had the announcement of not just one, but two England squads. There's, of course, been the main senior England Women's Ashes squad, and there's also been the announcement of an A squad that will be accompanying them. We'll come to the A squad in a minute. Let's start off with the main squad. What do you make of it all?
Well, there weren't really any surprises, were there, Raph?
Not
I think
really.
that it was kind of interesting, actually, that some of the media kind of painted perhaps the inclusion of Charlie Dean and Maya Boucher as surprises, but perhaps they were just like reaching for things to write about, because really this is very much business as usual, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it feels like quite predictable that those two players would be included. They both played against New Zealand. They both performed well.
Yeah, Charlie Dean in particular played 5 ODIs against New Zealand, and I think that that was a clear indication that Heather Knight really felt she discovered something in her. In fact, Heather Knight said something similar in the press conference, didn't she? She said that she really felt that she'd seen something that really excited her about Charlie Dean, and that's why she'd been included in those games. So of course she was going to be selected.
Yeah,
and no big surprises about Maya either.
Yeah, she's been out in Australia in the WBBL, performed reasonably well, and that experience will potentially be quite valuable going into an Ashes series out there.
Yeah, and England obviously think that she's one of their future prospects, and definitely is going to be an important player for England over the next 10 years.
Okay. And Heather Knight has been talking a bit about England's approach.
Yeah, we had the chance to talk to her in the press conference. I did wonder at first if she was now being sponsored by laundry detergent, because she used the word bold about 5 times. But then I realised that no, it's actually a bit of a different approach. Is this perhaps something perhaps a more of an Australian approach, Raf? Perhaps influenced by the Australian coach Lisa Keightley?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I don't really have any insight into the extent to which Lisa Keightley will have influenced that it's almost a sort of cultural move, isn't it? Because traditionally the England women's captain would have not been quite so forthcoming, quite so vociferous about this type of approach as Heather Knight was in the press conference on Thursday.
Yeah, she was talking about things like getting in the first punch. It was quite aggressive language.
It was fighting fire with fire, she said, and there were almost shades of the Alyssa Healy, let's bring the bee back. I wasn't quite sure whether I'm allowed to say that word or not, but you know what I'm referring to before the 2017 Women's Ashes.
Bring the B word back.
Exactly, talking up things, and it's that kind of war of words that in recent times has defined the men's Ashes, I think, and we're moving perhaps a little bit more in that direction with the women's Ashes. Not necessarily any bad thing, and Heather Knight clearly thinks that the way to be successful against Australia is to say we're going to lay down a gauntlet and be really aggressive, and we're going to go in hard. And I think that probably is the right approach.
Yeah, and they needed to do something new, didn't they? Because it didn't go too well in 2019. The Australians were all over them, and so perhaps a more aggressive approach is going to be what brings England success out in Australia.
It's interesting because she was asked about that 2019 Ashes series, and it's not one that we as English fans have particularly fond memories of. Is that fair to say, Sid?
Yeah, I mean the overriding memories of that series for me are Elise Perry at Canterbury, and of course Meg Lanning in the T20 at Chelmsford, was it?
Yeah.
Where she came out and from the first ball looked like she was going to hit 100. She did hit 100, and that kind of epitomised the entire series for me. That the sort of Lanning-Perry axis of sort of unstoppable, almost robotic, mechanical cricket that was just, nothing was going to stand in their way.
Yeah, and
that's my memory.
Yeah, absolutely. Two brilliant performances from Australians. Obviously, Perry with the ball at Canterbury. But to some extent, some questions to be answered after that series that maybe weren't necessarily answered, because it felt to me like Mark Robinson got booted out as the coach. He was the official ECB scapegoat, and that was that. And I still think that that wasn't a great way to treat him, and it wasn't a great ending to that summer, to be honest.
Yes, I mean it's a difficult one looking back, isn't it? I do feel that perhaps they got rid of Mark Robinson too early, and I think that he had a lot more to give. I mean, he's gone back and his first major job since taking the England job, he's won the men's county championship with Warwickshire. Is that right? I know my men's cricket well enough to know that. So he's still got it as a coach, and I think that England missed out perhaps on another 3 or 4 years of him, but. Those decisions were taken. They're in the past. Lisa Kiteley's taken over the reins now. And, if we get a different England approach, if we get a more aggressive approach, then maybe that does help carry them forward to Ashes' success. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, Heather Knight was saying, we've really improved since 2019. And the thing that she particularly said that I thought was actually a little bit strange was, we've got more leaders now than we had in 2019. We've got more leaders now. Now, if you actually look at the evidence for that, we can talk about whether or not they're a better side, but to specifically land on that idea that we've got more leaders, they've got Nat Siver now as the vice captain instead of Anya Shrubsole. But I mean, we've previously talked on the podcast about the fact that Nat Siver's been made vice captain. We think for slightly strategic reasons, in the sense that she isn't really an obvious successor to Heather Knight for the captaincy. And so, to some extent, that decision was made almost to shore up Heather's position and Heather Knight's authority as captain. We saw in the recent series, I think it was against New Zealand, when Heather Knight got injured and she missed the T20 leg of that series. And so Nat Siver was kind of standing in, and in the press conference I asked Siver something, and she just said, "Oh, that's not really up to me. I'm not the captain." And so the idea that England have suddenly got all of these leaders and they're just overcome by leadership, it just doesn't seem to me to reflect what I think's happened since 2019, which is that Heather Knight has stamped her authority over things and gone, I am actually even more of a of a captain who what I says goes than I was 2 years ago. That's how it feels like it's gone to me.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that Heather Knight, this is very much Heather Knight's squad. It's the squad she wanted to take to the World Cup and to the Ashes beforehand. And I guess to a certain extent, she'll be held accountable for that ultimately, that, if it does go really badly, then the buck is going to have to stop with her.
Potentially, although they haven't really got time to get a new captain in before the World Cup, so they're keeping going with this until at least April, aren't they? And then it's a very short gap until the Commonwealth Games to blood somebody new. So I think that yes, the buck does stop with her to some extent, but there is quite a big strategic gap now in terms of when you could actually insert a new captain. In a disruptive way.
Yeah, you'd have to. I think. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
Okay. Shall we talk a bit about the A squad as well? Because that's actually a bit more interesting than the main squad, isn't it?
Yeah, and I have a few opinions. Unfortunately, Raf.
Go for it, Sid. We're all here for your opinions.
Okay. Shall we start off with George Elwes? Let's talk about George Elwes because all of the contracted players, apart from Katie George, who's still not fully fit, unfortunately. Are in the sort of the main squad, except George Elwes, who's been relegated to the A squad. And this is just odd initially. I mean, basically these two squads are going to be fluid squads. So they've made it pretty clear that some players from the main squad will play in the A-team matches in order to give them time in the middle and all that kind of thing, and opportunities to play. So there are definitely going to be movement between the squads. I suspect more likely to be movement down than up as they send people to sort of warm up in the A-team matches.
Yeah.
But the squads are going to have to be fluid. They're going to be, it's almost like one squad, except we've called it two separate things. So we're going to put Georgia Elwes, one of our most senior players, and we're going to tell her she's in the A squad, not in the main squad. What are you trying to say to her? Are you trying to publicly humiliate her? I mean, if they'd stood up and said, okay, Georgia Elwes is captain of the A squad, that might have been a bit of a different thing. But actually, you explicitly asked Heather about the A squad captaincy, and what did she say, Raf?
She said, I don't know who the captain's going to be yet, and it's nothing to do with me. And I'm not exaggerating. That is almost exactly word for word what she said. I mean, I just don't accept that is true, I'm afraid, because she's the main England captain. The idea that they're not going to consult her as to who they're going to make captain of the A squad doesn't accord with my understanding of how things work within the England setup at the moment. But that's by the by. She basically said we haven't decided yet. So clearly they haven't gone, we're going to give Georgia Elwys the captaincy.
Yeah, so it does. I mean, if you were Dr. Evil and you were going in there and going, I'm going to make Georgia Elwys feel really bad. That's exactly how you do it, and it's just why? What was the point apart from if you had somehow deliberately wanted to make her feel bad? I just don't get. And of course, Georgia Elwys is herself. She's a lovely person. She's very much. She'll stay positive.
Yeah,
and she did some interviews on social media, and even more than that, the interviews on social media. But if she's not sitting inside going, what
have I done wrong?
What?
Yeah.
Then. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is that I'd like to have seen more younger players in there.
Okay.
So I know I keep banging on about Grace Scrivens, for example. And to be fair, there are some young players in there. There's Lauren Bell, there's Alice Capsey, there's Izzy Wong. There's some up and coming players. There's Bryony Smith in there, who I think should be captain of this A team.
Okay.
Who's someone. Those players have all got a lot of England games in front of them. We hope, barring injuries or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see more of those younger players involved and them given the real focus of this A Tour. Because the focus for me should be on giving people experience and doing this for the future. This is not for now, guys. This is for the future. So I think that Grace Scrivens should have been in there, for example, alongside Alice Capsey as another teenager, and is a really exciting prospect and someone that I think will play 150, 200 games ultimately for England. Who else, Raf?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with you. I think they have still been a little bit unclear about exactly what they see the purpose of the A Tour as being. I think that obviously the England A team are going to be playing an Australia A team. It'll be quite interesting to see what Australia's approach is to their A squad, because it feels like, from our perspective, that the Australia A squad is likely to have more of these kind of teenage, young, up-and-coming players, and is less likely to be kind of almost seen in the way that our A Tour seems to be being seen as, which is, as you say, just to give an opportunity to some of the senior players to just get some warm-up games under their belt. But yeah, there's a couple of names that stand out to me as people who really should have been in there. Danny Gibson, for example,
she was excellent in the 100, wasn't she? And after a couple of years when her late teenage years were kind of blighted by injury to the extent that you worried a little bit about whether she would ever be able to come back from that, but she came roaring back, and she was fantastic in the 100, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think she is entitled to feel disappointed actually at that, because when you hear we don't get an England A squad very many winters, when you hear that there's going to be one coming and you've had the season that Danny Gibson had, then I think she can be entitled to feel a bit disappointed. Bess Heath, for example, I remember that we did talk previously a little bit about future England wicketkeepers. At that point, I think we maybe didn't talk about her as much as we should have, because she had a bit of an injury. But she also picked herself up and had a good back end to the season. And why not pick her to be your wicketkeeper in your A team, because she is somebody.
Yeah, someone of huge potential with the bat.
Somebody who
solid keeper.
Somebody who could potentially be a future England wicketkeeper. So I think those are a couple of decisions that I think that they do seem to have just, I don't know, they don't seem to be very clear about what the A Tour is for, and perhaps what they think the A Tour is for also is not what we think the A Tour should be for. So that's been a bit strange. Should we talk a bit about...
I'll tell you what, Ralph, I'll bet you £1 million
okay,
that the average age of the England team that plays in these A matches is much higher than the average age of the Australia team. I bet Australia don't treat it like this. Australia will use it, to play the Maitland Browns and the Hannah Darlingtons and things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Hannah Darlington ends up being captain of the A team, for example.
I'm afraid I don't have £1 million to offer you, and I wouldn't be taking the bet anyway.
I don't have £1 million either.
Okay, but you're right. Yeah, it will be. The average age of the team, the 11 that plays in the warm-up matches, will be higher than the average age of the A squad, which I believe is 24, because you sat down and worked it out.
I did.
We've not got anything better to do, let's face it. Should we talk about Alice Capsey? I mean, we've talked about her a lot, but hey, there's more to say, isn't there? Because Heather Knight was specifically asked about her in the press conference.
Yeah, what did she
Not
say?
by us,
What did she say, Ralph?
What did she say? Well, I was actually
she almost ticked off the person that asked about it, didn't she?
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed by her response to this, to be honest. She was obviously trying to say it in a more general way to be a bit more diplomatic, but what she essentially said was, I don't think we should be over-egging some of these young players. So essentially what she's saying
Some of these young players being Alice Capsey.
Yeah, she thinks that there's a media hype around Alice Capsey and she doesn't think it's justified. I found it that, and it's the second time that she's actually a little bit done down Alice Capsey in a press conference, it feels like. And actually it's starting to make me a bit cross. And I'll try and be restrained here. I understand that Heather Knight, as captain, has got existing loyalty to her current crop of players, but it does increasingly feel like she is ignoring the evidence in front of her eyes. This is a player who, half century in her first match at Lords, got Heather Knight out. May not have helped her case, but hopefully you would not expect the England captain to hold that against you. You would hope that would actually go in your favour. And to ignore that, and to actually almost, it feels like when the media now ask about Alice Capsey, we're being, as you say, ticked off a bit, and we're being told, oh no, you don't really understand, you're just journalists, and so I'm gonna say to you that you actually have misunderstood, and you think that she's better than she is. I mean, we've got eyes. We've got brains.
Yeah, and the hundreds of world-class competition, there's no doubt about that. Of course, we understand that the very, very top Australians weren't there this year, but I mean, the ones that were are still quality players, And if Alice Capsey's making runs against them and taking wickets against them, she's mixing it with the very best. It's not like, for years, often in England, we heard this thing about particular players where you'd kind of mention a player to someone that was in the England setup, and they go, yeah, but she's scored a couple of 50s in the Women's County Championship, but it's just not the same as. But the 100 is supposed to be their flagship world-class competition. And Alice Capsey didn't just have one good match in this. She was one of the dominant players in the competition.
She was one of the big reasons why Oval Invincibles won.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Raph. Overall, it's disappointing that she's not going to be in there, and it can't come soon enough for me still.
Yeah, great for her to be in the A squad, and I really hope that she
slams this opportunity.
Yeah, and just basically says, because I think for some young players, actually hearing the England captain say a couple of times in press conferences, I don't think that you're as good as people think you are, it's a bit discouraging. Hopefully, I think Alice Capsey is a young person of great resilience, and that won't have affected her negatively, but I think that's another reason why it's not really a great angle to take in press conferences, to be honest. Anyway, shall we wrap up there, Sid?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm sure that we'll be talking much more about the Ashes in future episodes, so stay tuned. Bye for now.
Bye.